Hi, folks. Over the past few episodes that I've been sharing my experience of ministering to a transsexual Christian, and I hope that today that I'm able to help you to gain some new and deeper insights on this important question of if a man can become a woman. And that's really, it seems like where a lot of this kind of revolves around that particular question. Now, obviously, that this is not an area of expertise that I have, but I do know how to do research to find answers on these types of questions. And so that's what I wanted to do with you today, is share with you the result of my research. But also I've invited a guest to be with me today. And as you'll see, that there's something special about this guest. And what I've done is I've consulted AI and have invited Maggie, our AI avatar, to come along and share with us some of her information about if a man can become a woman or a woman a man. Let's see what she has to say.
Thanks for inviting me to the broadcast, Kerry. I'm really looking forward to interacting with you, and hopefully I can shed some light on this confusing topic. I know a lot of people have different answers to the question of if a man can become a woman or a woman a man. I hope to provide some insights strictly from a scientific perspective, not an emotional or political one. So thanks again for inviting me.
So, I think that's important because, a lot of times we have strong feelings about these particular topics, but it's important for us to, I believe, start with the scientific facts as best as we can understand them. So we want to focus on the facts about whether a man can become a woman or a woman a man. And I think that AI can help us with that answer. So let's go ahead and see what we can learn from that.
The short answer is no. A person who is biologically male cannot become biologically female in terms of fully changing their underlying biological sex. Biological sex is determined by chromosomes, gonads, testes or ovaries, hormones, and reproductive anatomy. For example, males typically have XY chromosomes, testes, and produce testosterone. Females typically have XX chromosomes, ovaries, and produce estrogen. These traits are established during fetal development and cannot be fully altered through medical intervention. Chromosomal patterns, for instance XY or XX, remain unchanged even after surgery or hormone treatment. This is why a biological male cannot become a female biologically.
Now, I know for me, this brief introduction to the biology can be helpful, but I always need, or I oftentimes need, easy ways of remembering or thinking about complex topics. And so what I have here is an analogy, a metaphor that has been helpful to me, and maybe it will also be helpful to you. And it's the analogy of an automobile assembly plant. Now, with an automobile assembly plant, think of it in terms, and let's assume that this automobile assembly plant is completely set up to be automatic through robotics. And so once the raw materials are delivered at the assembly plant, then all of these robotic systems go into place to produce a vehicle. Now let's assume, for the sake of illustration here, that this automobile assembly plant produces only 2 models of a particular make of vehicle. And so when the raw materials are brought to the assembly plant, the robots go into action. And it's the same that what happens when conception takes place is then that individual who has been conceived is going to go down one of two developmental pathways. Now, those developmental pathways are going to be unique in some respects, but there will also be shared components to that. But ultimately, what happens when you get to the final product is that nobody assigns that make a vehicle a particular identity. We know that it's gone through the process and that it is one or the other. And so that identity of that vehicle isn't assigned, but it just is what it is. And also, the identity of the vehicle cannot be reassigned. It can be altered, and it also can be made, in certain respects, non-functional, but the fundamental plan of that vehicle remains the same. Now, when it comes to biology, I think we can benefit from looking at the gamete pathway model to help us to understand a little bit more about this whole question of, can a man become a woman or a woman a man? Now, a gamete is a human reproductive cell, and it's also known as a sex cell. Typically, our bodies are set up to make one gamete form or another, one type of sex cell or the other. And so the large gamete form is, or the large gamete pathway is the body plan that produces the egg, and that's for females. And then the small gamete pathway is the body plan that produces the sperm, and that's for males. So for biological classification, look to the gamete pathway is both accurate and widely endorsed. But people will then ask, well, what about intersex persons or people who have differences in sexual development? And that's really a good question. And I think that that's where the analogy of the automobile assembly plant can be helpful. Let's assume that these robots in the assembly plant, that they don't always function according to plan. That sometimes that when they don't function according to plan, that may affect general anatomy, like people who are born with conditions related to their pancreas, or conditions related to their thyroid, or conditions that are neurological. There's a whole host of different type of conditions that we end up being born with, that as a result of these robot systems, if you will, in gestation, not functioning properly. And that not only can affect our general anatomy, but it also can affect our reproductive anatomy. And here is a whole bunch of information about intersex persons that I got from AI, and it says that some individuals possess mixed or ambiguous pathways. As I did a little bit of extra research on this, is that I discovered that some intersex persons have testes that are functional and can produce viable sperm. Others have ovaries that are functional and can produce viable eggs. Others may have both egg or ovaries and testes present, and these are ovotestes that are part of an intersex condition. Now, as far as the medical literature goes, based on the research that I've done, is that there have been no cases of any individuals who have ovotestes who have been able to and be fertile. And then actually there are some persons who have neither the testes or the ovaries, and so as a result that they are completely infertile. But these are differences in sexual development, those pesky robotic systems that are at work in our development. As I said, oftentimes they don't function according to plan. You know, I hear people from time to time say something like this. They will say, well, God made me this way. And I think that when somebody says that, the first question that we need to ask them is essentially, do you then believe in God? Is that what you're saying? And maybe they do, maybe they don't. But if they do, then I would ask them that, well, then what type of God do you believe in? Because not everybody's concept of God is the same. But one thing I do know about this is that God doesn't make mistakes. And one thing I know about this is that you're not a mistake. Now, you're not a mistake if the robotic systems that were operating during gestation, that you ended up with problems with your general anatomy, whether it's your pancreas or thyroid or your neurological system, you're not a mistake. And that and you will be blessed, and you will be blessed as you are, and you can glorify God as you are, and that's the same with respect to your reproductive anatomy. So the first notion that we need to remember about intersex persons is that they are persons of value. And they are not any less a person of value than those who have fully functioning reproductive anatomy. By the way, not all infertile people are intersex. Is that and certainly some intersex people are fertile, and so it's a complicated issue, but we need to be clear that that God doesn't jump in when our bodies are being formed in the womb. That God doesn't jump in and correct every place where these typical systems that are at work, which assemble, how fearfully and wonderfully we're made, that he doesn't jump in and correct every problem. Otherwise, there'd be nobody with any pancreatic problems or other hormone issues or even reproductive problems. So we need to think clearly about this. But one of the things that we can hold on to when we truly believe that that God is real and he is at work in this process is that he has a good purpose and plan for your life, regardless of whatever conditions that you might be dealing with. So let's then ask the question of what happens when a man seeks hormone therapy.
Let's consider what actually changes within a man who is seeking hormone therapy. Hormone therapy involving testosterone suppression combined with estrogen therapy for transgender women induces physical changes such as breast development, softer skin and reduced muscle mass, redistribution of body fat to feminine patterns, reduction in facial and body hair growth over time. However, hormone therapy does not typically cause changes to internal reproductive organs. The changes brought about by hormone therapy are secondary and may affect a person's appearance, but not their fundamental sex characteristics.
I think that that's important for us to understand, is that when an individual, in an attempt to bring their body into more congruence with their psychology, that they sometimes will pursue hormone therapy or perhaps even surgery. But while hormone therapy and surgery may affect an individual's appearance, and it may also cause functioning organs or systems to become non-functional, it doesn't change the underlying gamete pathway or body plan of that individual. That remains fixed and unchanged, actually, from birth. And so let's continue on as we are thinking about this and ask the question about, what happens with genital reconstruction surgery?
So, what happens with surgery? Surgery may involve genital reconstruction surgery, GERS. For transgender women, vaginoplasty can construct a functional vaginal structure using penile and scrotal tissue. While highly advanced, the surgery does not involve the creation of fully functional organs like ovaries or a uterus, meaning the individual cannot conceive or menstruate. Other surgeries include facial feminization, breast augmentation, and body contouring, which allows for a more traditionally feminine physical appearance. These changes are cosmetic and functional, but do not alter male chromosomes or reproductive biology. The limitations of gender-affirming surgeries are the following. Chromosomal sex, XX or XY, remains unchanged, as medical science cannot modify DNA in a way that changes a person's chromosomal sex throughout their body. A transgender woman, biologically male, will not develop ovaries, fallopian tubes, or a uterus, and therefore cannot ovulate, conceive, or bear children. Similarly, transgender men do not develop testes or produce sperm. And as we've noted about hormones, while hormone therapy can suppress or enhance the production of estrogen and testosterone, it does not replace internal organs like testes with ovaries. As with hormone therapy, genital reconstruction surgery does not change the underlying sexual biology of an individual. While such interventions may change how a person appears, their fundamental biology remains the same.
So again, it's this concept of our underlying biology that our reproductive anatomy, and certainly that aspects of that reproductive anatomy can be removed and our appearance modified, but that doesn't mean that a man becomes a woman or a woman becomes a man. Now, I've had a lot of conversations with Chris about his identity and detransitioning, and I just want to kind of touch on some of those conversations that we've had. Now, I want to be very clear about this, is that these conversations in the beginning that were initiated by him, and so we had, when I connected with him in 2018, that he was seriously considering this issue of detransitioning. Now, we also talked about the legalities of that, because along the line, when he decided to pursue this path, he had his birth certificate changed to reflect a female sex. He had his driver's license changed again to reflect female sex, and his social security number changed. And so he would have to go back and change all of those legal documents as well. And then we also had many conversations about his physical and mental health. Chris is not in the best of health and has a number of physical problems and health issues that that afflict him. Quite honestly, is that I admire him for his great spirit and his tenacity through all types of difficulties with respect to his physical health. And one aspect of his physical health also is severe problems with his mental health. Chris has schizoid affective disorder, and that from time to time that it becomes very problematic for him, resulting in hospitalizations. As a matter of fact, if I recall from some previous conversations that I've had with him, is that he's been hospitalized over 50 times. And in addition to that, has been homeless for long stretches of time. But now I'm pleased to report that he has been stable over the past few years that I've been working with him. Now there have been episodes when his schizophrenia really becomes problematic, and again he needs to be hospitalized and his medications adjusted. I've found from working with him that oftentimes when that happens, when he becomes symptomatic, is that it's because he's undergoing some sort of med change, and it can really create a lot of chaos for him. Now, there was one time when he was having some health concerns, and we started talking about, well, what might be going on with that. And I asked him, I said, well, have you had your prostate checked? And that, at least in his case, with his genital reconstruction surgery, that the prostate was still intact. And he certainly could, like any other man, get prostate cancer. That and so, and by the way, Chris has had karyotype tests done, and which have come back with a report of him having XY chromosomes, in addition to some of these other aspects, which goes back to speak to this issue, is that we can alter our appearance, but we don't change the foundational body plan that we've had from the moment of conception. Now, one of the things that I've talked a lot with Chris about is the issue of presentation and pronouns. And I will elaborate more on that in a later broadcast. For now, I'll just say this much about that at this time, is that for now, that when I am talking about Chris, and by the way, I don't think that there's any hypocrisy that's going on with respect to this. When I'm talking about Chris, is that I always refer to him with male pronouns, and I use his birth name. But when I am talking to Chris, I most always use his adopted name as well as female pronouns. I'll explain my reasoning for that at a later date. So there are, obviously there's just a whole bunch of complicated issues that we need to consider when we're seeking an answer to this question of, can a man become a woman, and particularly a transsexual man who has gone as far as anybody can go on this, that Chris has had not only the genital reconstruction surgeries, but also breast implants, the Adam's apple shaved, the face contouring, and electrolysis to remove facial hair, as well as even to this day, consistent hormone treatments. So when it comes to this question of, can a man become a woman or a woman a man, is that I think that we can come up with a definitive answer on this, and Maggie tells us in her own words about this.
We can give a definitive answer to the question of if through medicine and surgery a man can become a woman or a woman a man biologically. The answer is no. While biological sex cannot be completely changed due to the fixed nature of chromosomes and reproductive anatomy, medical and surgical interventions can greatly modify secondary sex characteristics, creating a physical and social presentation that aligns with an individual's gender identity. So, when we're seeking an answer to the question of if a man can become a woman, we want to bear in mind the facts of science and medicine. And though medicine and surgery can change someone's appearance, it does not change their sex. Males remain male, females remain female.
So, with respect to this issue of medicine and surgery, and this is really something that we need to just maybe understand more clearly in our culture today, is that biological realities is not bigotry. As I've said in previous broadcasts, my goal in dealing with folks who are struggling with these issues is to love them deeply and to think clearly about these topics. And so, when we're thinking clearly about these topics, we need to ask the question, should biology or gender identity be our first consideration regarding gender dysphoria and transgenderism? And I hope to explore that question in deeper detail as we go along. Thanks for watching. I hope to see you next time.